is my Abingdon Marathon race recap video. So in this one we're going to go back through the race, what was I thinking at all different points during it, and most importantly I'm going to answer some of the big questions. Why did I end up cramping? Why was it so soon? And what am I going to do differently next time around? Hello, I'm Nick. I am a 3-hour marathon runner. That's right, not a sub 3, but a 3-hour marathon runner. So in this one I'm just going to go back through my Abingdon Marathon race. Hopefully you've seen the race video which explains a lot of that, but just some reflections, kind of how I was feeling at different points in the race and those big important questions. So I'm recording this exactly 1 week after the Abingdon Marathon. I'm out on a walk. I haven't been for a single run since. I've got another week of no running to go, but yeah, just keeping moving. Thought I'd bring you out on this walk today. So let's get straight into it then. Firstly, what was the plan and how did I execute it? So those of you who watched that pre-race video, I stated my plan was to go out at 2:55 pace, so that's 6:40 a mile or 4:09 a kilometre. But for the first mile, just ease into that a little bit, and that's exactly what I did. It's a little bit uphill that first mile in Abingdon Marathon, so I just made sure I kept it nice and controlled. I think the split coming up on Strava was a 6:48, so around 4:14 a kilometre, and that felt right. Like I didn't rush out the gate running around that track and then out onto the road. I just kept it really chill, tried not to spike the heart rate or anything, and yeah, felt good for just settling in a little bit slower than my goal pace. And then from mile 2 onwards at Abingdon, you've actually got a bit of a downhill at this stage, so it feels quite natural just to kind of pick up the pace slightly. So yeah, that's exactly what I did, getting down to around that 6:40 a mile, 4:09 a k. And then we get into a bit of a traily section, a bit like actually what I'm walking on now at the Greenway in Letchworth, and it's a little bit twisty turny, yeah, I'd say a little bit less stable underfoot. So it's around sort of from mile 3 to mile 4 I think ish, and then for mile 5 you've got to run through Abingdon town centre, and again that's a little bit twisty turny in places, great atmosphere through the market square, and but yeah, perhaps just not that easy to kind of settle into a rhythm so much at that stage. So I did notice running around at 6:40 a mile pace, it didn't feel quite as easy as I wanted it to. I've done a lot of it in training and often it felt super chill, so I did have a little look at my heart rate, which I don't often do too much in races, but I just felt I wanted to get a sense check, and actually it was a bit higher than I was expecting, so around sort of 171, 170. And for context, my max heart rate is over 200, so yeah, my heart rate is probably a bit higher than others perhaps would expect, but a lot of times in my training for around that sort of pace I was in the mid 160s, so I thought I'll just bring down the effort a little bit and bring down the pace obviously as part of that, and just see. Fucking hell mate, Jesus, and you got run over. I had actually felt a couple of tiny twinges in my hamstring in the very early miles, and I was like, that can't be cramp, can it? Like that can't be, it was just a bit of stiffness I guess, but anyway, more to come on that shortly, but I just thought I would just note that. And then we got onto the loop, so this is from just under sort of 6 miles, 10k, I think it's about an 8.5 mile loop, something like that you do, and this is a place where you can really start to lock into the pace. And actually for mile 7 it's a little bit uphill, so that is where I really just decided I'm just going to ease off slightly and see how it feels. And so that mile, 6:45 I think it was, and yeah, my heart rate actually was still quite high, but I felt the effort level was a little bit less. And then really I just went into kind of cruise control. I was ticking off miles a little bit, as I say, slower than that kind of 6:40 a mile, 4:09 kilometre pace, and yeah, I was really able to settle in. You've got a little bit of kind of going up and down curves for a bit, but then you can run on the road mainly. That's obviously really helpful. And yeah, just at that point I could really feel like I could click into gear, and the effort level definitely dropped. If you have a look at my heart rate in that period, it's dropping to like kind of the low 160s, which is, yeah, really good for me. That's really kind of even better than where I expect it to be for a marathon. I'm probably looking at more like mid 160s to low 170s. I was just ticking off the miles at that point. So I was running with a guy called Lewis for a bit, and yeah, we had a tiny little bit of a chat. I think it was his first marathon, and the fact that I was feeling that comfortable that I was just saying a few words was quite revealing, I think, at that stage. And yeah, we just felt really good. There's a point where you get to, I think it's around sort of the 14 mile mark, where you go again into a bit of a, it's not a trail section because I think it is kind of spongy concrete, but yeah, it's just something a little bit different to the road. I actually found it quite springy, and I didn't mind that section at all, to be honest. I know not everyone is a fan of it, but yeah, for me certainly I had quite a fun time on it. That was where John from the 2 Running Brooms was kindly filming me for the second time, which was amazing. And yeah, I was just ticking along, and actually that mile was really where I was feeling my best, because I think for mile 15, as we kind of come out of that track, it was 6:39 and I was feeling amazing. And as I said in my video, how quickly things can change, because I saw Marie was feeling great. She said my family and Georgie were just round the corner, but as I got to see them, the cramp struck, as you saw. So yeah, just basically as I hit the 15 mile mark, so a lot earlier than I was expecting. And I say expecting, but you know, my training had gone so well that I'd had one tiny bit of cramp during it, and that was basically at the end of a 21 mile long run. And literally in the very final stretch of that race, I kind of picked it quite up to around, I don't know, something like 5:30 a mile for a bit of a sprint finish, and I felt a twinge in one of my hamstrings just as I crossed the line. But for the rest of my training, and I did a lot of training in around that pace at quite long distances, we're talking 21, 22, 23, 24 miles, and not a sign of cramp. Exactly the same fueling strategy, which we'll get into. So I was in complete shock, if I'm honest, when that cramp came on. Apologies for all my swearing in the second half of the race. I yeah, was in shock, and I think that's what it came down to, and anger and frustration really, because cramps is definitely something I've had a fair bit of experience with in the past, and I felt this time that I might have conquered them, but alas, that was not the case. So in terms of managing it, it was just a case of exactly that. I had to ease off. I think I got it in my right hamstring first, then I got it in my left hamstring about a mile later, maybe a little bit less than that. Going uphill section, this mile 16 was tougher anyway, so I definitely had to ease off there. But actually I didn't have to stop, and I just felt actually that I could pick that pace back up. Not quite to sub 3 pace, so I was averaging around sort of 6:55 a mile ish, and I felt like that was kind of my limit before I felt a bit too much of like I was going to get cramp again. So as I said in the video, it was just managing, and yeah, got another big bout of it I think in mile 21. By that point Charlie had passed me, and then Jay passed me as well, and that's when I really got it bad. And yeah, then I could slowly pick up the pace again, and And then I was starting to think, with a few miles to go, that maybe this sub 3 could still happen, because even though my watch, the average pace was ticking up from, I think it was sort of 6:42, 6:43 earlier in the race, then it was starting to say 6:47, 6:48, up to 6:50, so 4:15 a k, and then slightly beyond. But the thing with Abingdon is it's not the biggest race in the world, and it's very easy to run the tangents of the course, in which case you can pretty much run the marathon distance precisely. So you're always looking at around 26.2 miles or 42.2 k, and so I knew I probably had even more wiggle room than you would in one of these big city marathons. So I felt, as I was going on past Jay around the 23-mile mark, I was like, okay, well, I'm actually picking it up a bit here relatively, and maybe it's just about on. But mile 25 was uphill, and we had that dreaded underpass to deal with, about 24.5 miles, and I'd actually done it in a shakeout run the day before, so I knew what to expect. And of course, when you're running an easy run the day before a race and you're super fresh from the taper, it feels like nothing, but of course it feels a bit different on marathon day. So that was tough. I think I definitely lost some momentum there. I think I got some cramp again. I can't remember exactly kind of what was going on around mile 25, but it was my second slowest of the race. So I think a combination of the uphill, the cramp, and the fact it was mile 25 really just all played against me in terms of trying to continue that kind of pick up in speed, or certainly to a point where I could get that sub 3. And what was then strange is I hit the 25-mile marker and I was actually like, okay, my legs feel all right now from like potentially, you know, a bit cramping and whatnot before, so I'm just going to push here and see what happens. And that's what I did, and I couldn't believe, to be honest, I was overtaking quite a few people at that stage, which obviously you do sadly get a bit of a buzz from. And yeah, that was my fastest mile of the race, a 6:34, and yeah, I'm insanely proud of that, to somehow find that from somewhere. No, probably the sub 3 wasn't going to happen at that stage, because I knew I had to run quicker than that to find it, but really proud to kind of, yeah, finish with some speed, because I was such a sorry state after Boston Marathon UK 18 months ago, and I really blew up in that race. So the fact I could finish strong was really encouraging. My last 0.2 of a mile was, I think, about 5:30 pace, which is my 5k pace. So yeah, that was cool to really kind of finish fast and finish strong. I didn't see Charlie at all on the track, but when I've looked back in the pictures, etc., like, he is actually just a little bit ahead of me. So that's why I was so surprised when he hadn't quite managed that sub 3 either, because, you know, when he went past me, I thought he was there. And yeah, it's just one of those things with all of us just missing out, but it is an arbitrary number. It's a goal that we set ourselves, and ultimately, yeah, massively proud of the race and the effort. But let's dig down into what perhaps went wrong and what I'm going to do differently next time. So fueling, just want to touch on that. So it was 80 grams of carbs an hour. So actually taking my first gel, so an SIS beta fuel gel, 40 grams of carbs after 20 minutes, and then around sort of every 25 minutes to 30 minutes afterwards, taking another gel. My fourth gel was a caffeine one, which had 200 milligrams of caffeine in it, and also had 3 electrolyte salt stick chews to have during the race. Beforehand, I'd done a carb load for a couple of days, got up to around sort of 500 grams of carbs, so about 10 grams of carbs an hour for me, just a bit under. And I was sipping on Lucozade sport drink for a lot of that. So yeah, getting the carbs and the electrolytes in. And on the morning itself I had a bagel with peanut butter, more carb drink, and yeah, just felt I was really well fueled for the race. And that is something I had practiced a few times in training. I was used to what I was doing, hadn't had any cramps at all. And then when you come to the day itself, the nutrition all went well, went fine. My only thought is I definitely felt maybe I could have taken on more carbs. Now you're never going to do that when you're already, you know, you've been practicing 80 grams of carbs an hour, and maybe, you know, again looking at whether I could have more caffeine, because I only had one caffeine gel, albeit a big shot of it. Yeah, those are things that I'm going to look at for next time, along with electrolytes, more electrolytes in the race, because these Salt Stick Chews, they don't have a whole lot of electrolyte in it. Do I think the cramping was down to my fueling? Well, normally there's two schools of thought here. One is it's an electrolyte imbalance, which I've just been talking about, not getting enough salt. I don't actually sweat very much. I've actually got a condition, well, that's what the doctors believe anyway, without actually doing a gene test, but where I don't sweat very much. So I don't think I lose a whole lot of salt through sweating. See, there's this amount of rate that you sweat, but there's also how much of a salty sweater you are. Again, there's nothing that indicates that I'm a particularly salty sweater, but these are all things to delve into. So I'm gonna try and find out exactly how much I sweat, how salty a sweater I am, and really make sure I'm getting exactly what I need, because these cramps, they've, you know, I've done a number of marathons where they've come back to bite me, and I really just want to get to the bottom of it, to be honest. So that could be a reason, not enough carbs or not enough electrolytes, because again my metabolism is ridiculous, and I wonder actually whether sort of more like 90 grams of carbs an hour is what I truly need. And the other thing that people often associate with cramps is that muscular fatigue, where you're just not strong enough to maintain a certain pace during the marathon, and if you haven't got enough fuel or enough strength in the legs, then ultimately that leads to cramps. Again, I really felt that I'd nailed this in training. I'd done so many long runs where I was working pretty hard towards the end of a long run and simulating that kind of race day marathon pace feeling, often going quicker than marathon pace. I did one run which was alluded to by Andy, the FOD runner, 24 miles, and the last 10k were at around sort of 6:10 a mile pace. I did about a sort of 38:14 10k as part of a 24-mile long run, having also done another 3 miles 5k at marathon pace earlier on, and just kind of done a steady pace throughout. These sorts of runs really gave me a massive amount of confidence that I could sustain that pace, 2:55 to be frank, or quicker, for the duration of a marathon. And there were many people that were telling me I was in much better shape than that, closer to sort of 250, 252, and why not even go for that? So my decision to go out at 255, I kind of stand by, because that is what my training has indicate I was definitely in shape to do, and potentially kick on at the end. But as I've said it, the marathon is the marathon, and the cramps came, and yeah, it didn't go to plan. The fact I got so close to a sub 3, even with quite a number of bouts of cramps, probably demonstrates the sort of shape I was in, that I could get that close. But hey, it also doesn't lie, and that's what I had on the day. I don't really think the weather was too much of a factor. It was a little bit windy in places, when we're talking compared to what people have seen in London and Manchester earlier this year, or more recently in Berlin. the weather was pretty much perfect, as good as you could hope for, sort of around 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, and there was a bit of wind that you felt at times, but nothing that was sort of massively problematic. So again, when you think of electrolyte imbalance and so on, often that hits hardest when it's a hot day and you're sweating a lot, and that just again wasn't the case here. So it's a tricky one. Other people have talked about the course, so Andy Fodrunner and John and Dawn from 2 Running Brooms, they've mentioned that maybe the Abingdon course, in terms of what it's worth, it might cost me about 5 minutes during the race, because there is a few twists and turns. There's the trail section I mentioned, and there's a couple of miles towards the end which are a bit uphill. But actually, when I've looked at my training, I've had kind of similar race conditions, or even a little bit hillier in places, a more trail, etc., and I've been able to sustain that pace pretty comfortably. So again, it was probably flatter and faster than I have had in training. And so while I'm sure there are faster courses out there, also, you know, at my level there were always people to run with, so there was never a moment where I was like completely on my own, apart from of course when you fall off the pace and you're running a completely different pace. But again, not too much of a factor there, I don't think. And in these bigger races, while it's flatter, there's less curbs, these types of things. Also a factor is the fact you're going to run more in these races. The water stations are always a bit chaotic. Yeah, you're going to have that longer distance in the total, because it's so hard to run the tangents when it's a busier race. So there's kind of pros and cons here, and I just think it's not as straightforward as saying the course cost me 5 minutes or so. I really don't think that. I'm not saying there aren't other options out there, and I will be looking to see what comes next. But yeah, I have to say, I thought Abingdon, the race itself was so well organised. Shout out to Abingdon AC. They're one of just a few running clubs in the country now that hosts a marathon every year, and they do a bloody amazing job. So thank you so much to everyone that's involved in organising that race, all volunteers, and I really can't fault it, because the marshals are fantastic. The support out on the course was amazing. It's the biggest thing I take from the race, like just so much support for what is a smaller race. It was just fantastic. Another thing some people have mentioned is whether I thought I was overtrained. Truthfully, I really don't feel this. Like, I know sometimes, you know, you can't see things that are in front of your face, but actually I felt really kind of in control for the whole of the block. There was only one time where I felt particularly fatigued, and that was after I did that special block date, which was about 4 and a bit weeks out from the marathon. So I took 2 rest days to recover from that, and then my final big workout of the block was 3 weeks out, and then after that I just tapered it down gradually, and I came into the race feeling really fresh. I felt great the day before, and so, you know, I don't think I was coming into it on tired legs. I just think ultimately that my legs weren't strong enough. That's what I think is probably what it's coming down to. Maybe a bit more nutrition, maybe a bit more electrolytes, but actually I'm coming from a base where I'm not a particularly strong person, and you know, even during my PT with Georgie, there'd be times where my hamstrings would cramp a little from just the stuff we were doing. So I just think that's a weak point for me, and as much as I've improved massively and I feel so much better for it, I think I'm probably just not quite there yet with that kind of muscular strength in my hamstrings, because I never feel anything in my quads. My calves are usually absolutely fine. I always cramp in my hamstrings, so I think that's just an area to work on. But I'm gonna leave no stone unturned. I'm gonna think through all of these things and try and basically tick all them off the list and get to that point where I can finish a marathon without any major cramping. And I'll tell you, when I get there, it will feel amazing. I've got so much to look forward to. I haven't made any decisions yet about my next marathon. I'm thinking it's probably not going to be the spring, but more on that soon. And I've got so much that I'm looking forward to. I've got races coming up at lots of different distances, and it's going to just be really refreshing. So I'm going to take a bit of a break from that marathon focus. I've got this recovery time of 2 weeks no running, but I'm coming into it feeling fresh, feeling good, and I cannot wait to share it with you all. So if you do want to follow along, then please do consider subscribing to the channel. We're not done with this sub 3 dream, not by a long shot. I want to get faster at all distances, so yeah, please do come along for the ride. If you've enjoyed the video, do give it a like, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.